Hello everybody, welcome back to Quest for Truth, and Merry Christmas. Today we have a special episode, and which is the final installment of our theology series, and we're finishing with talking about God's eternal kingdom. But first, I want to start by connecting what we're going to be looking forward to here to what has already happened. And I want to do that by reading from a hymn. It came upon a midnight clear, and it says this: It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. The world in solemn stillness lay, to hear the angels sing. And ye beneath life's crushing blow, whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way, with painful steps and slow, look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on the wing. O rest beside the weary road, and hear the angels sing. For lo, the days are hastening on, by prophets seen of old, when with the ever-circling years shall come the time foretold, when peace shall over all the earth its ancient splendors fling, and the whole world send back the song which now the angels sing. And I think that that is a great Christmas carol because it begins with the birth of Christ. It talks about the effect that it has on our lives now, and then it goes into what the coming of the second coming of Christ looks like. And I think that's what's important about Christmas, is not just looking back, but looking back so that we can look ahead to what is coming. And that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today, right? When we celebrate the birth of Christ, points us ahead to the return of Christ and his eternal reign. So we're going to start by, as we kind of have the last few weeks, we're going to kind of take one step back from the kingdom to look at how that kingdom comes into play. And we're going to be in Revelation 20, starting in verse 10, just for a second, looking at the final judgment that God brings upon Satan and the unbelievers. So in verse 10, we see Satan's demise, and that is, And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are also, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. So remember that last week we talked about Satan at the end of the millennial kingdom would be released, not release himself, but he would be released by God, and would draw some of those to himself that were in the flesh and who weren't following God, and he would deceive them and they would follow him. But then at the end of this very short rebellion, if you can call it that, he would be finally and completely judged and thrown into the lake of fire. And it's worth noting here that at the end of this verse, that he will be tormented day and night. I think we talked about this probably before, but this idea that Satan is going to be in hell tormenting people is completely wrong. He is not the leader of hell, or the king of hell. He is in hell being punished for his own sin and for his rebellion against God. So next, in 11 through 15, we see the great white throne judgment. Then I saw a great white throne, and him who sat on it, from whose presence earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, the great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from the things which were written in the books, according to their deeds. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and the death And death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every one of them according to their deeds. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So the great white throne judgment marks all of those who weren't covered by Christ in his atonement, right? They're going to be judged by their works, and all of them found lacking, because there's nothing that they could possibly do that would free them from the guilt that they have, and it's an appropriate punishment for the crimes that they've committed against the eternal God. And so after all of those, after Satan and all the second resurrection happens, the unbelievers are resurrected and punished and sent to the lake of fire. We see, starting in verses chapter 21, verses 1 through 8, we see the beginning of the eternal kingdom. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there is no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people. And God himself will be among them, and he will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning, or crying, or pain. The first things have passed away. And he who sits on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. And he said, Write, for these words are faithful and true. Then he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of the water of life without cost. He who overcomes will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So now I think there's really three key takeaways here that we can look just in this passage about the kingdom. And kind of see this in two places, but we'll see that this kingdom will be new. And in 1 and 2, we see we're introduced to the new heaven and the new earth, and right, because the old earth had passed away, and then we see this new Jerusalem coming down, right? And then in verse 5, kind of after a little bit, we kind of see this where he who sits on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. And what does it mean that he's making all things new? Well, it means that he's continually making things new, which means all things will always be new. Now, we always, like, if you ever bought something new, like a house or a car or a phone or a computer or clothes, whatever it may be, they don't stay new very long. They're only new for a short time, and then they start to break down, and they get viruses as computers and phones, and they start lagging and all those things, and they get outdated very quickly. But in this kingdom, God will constantly be making everything new, so that it is always in the state of newness. It is always in a perfect state, and that is the kingdom that we'll be living in. This, even our, from our bodies to the world to everything in it, everything will constantly be being made new. Now, secondly, we see in verse 3 I think the greatest thing about the kingdom, and it was also in the millennial kingdom as well, so this is kind of an extension of that, but it's the greatest part of this, and it's that God will be dwelling with his people. And this is how it was always meant to be. I mean, when we go back to Genesis, you see God walking with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. That's how it was designed to be. He made Adam and Eve so that he could walk with them, so that he could talk with them. And then that collapsed with sin, but now that sin will be destroyed and removed, he will once again walk with us face to face, and we will be with him very intimately, in a more intimate way than we've ever can know him on earth, but we'll see him face to face. And that's the wonder of the kingdom of God, being in his presence day and night forever. And then in verses 7 and 8, we see that it will be a moral kingdom. Like I said, sin will be removed, and it'll be removed really in two different ways. Verse 7, we see that he's Jesus is speaking. He says, I will be his God and he will be my son. Those who believe, we will be like him. We will be, that process that we talked about that started positionally of being righteous, being free from sin positionally. God sees us as if we were sinless because our sin is on Christ. And yet in this kingdom, in this day, we will be practically righteous. We will be without sin. So where Paul says that, I do the things that I don't want to do and I don't do the things I want to do, we won't have that conundrum anymore. We will do the things that are right and we won't do the things that are wrong. And secondly, in verse 8, we see that those who are the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, immoral persons, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars will be judged. So this comes, like we talked about a little bit after the judgment. Those who are immoral, unbelievers will be sentenced to their punishment and for eternity. And so there will be no more strife. Now, I love that kind of in that verse. It starts off with these kind of big ideas, like the cowardly and unbelieving being people who don't turn to God, who don't turn to Christ, and who don't believe. And then it goes to abominable and murderers and immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters. And it's almost like, yeah, those people, they deserve it. And then it's like, and all liars. And I think that that's almost there to say, just in case you think that you're not one of those people, it's like, you can't escape that. It's like, Jesus with the rich young ruler, when he kind of brought out the one thing that he didn't do. And I think this is kind of like that. We're saying, you're all liars. And we're not special as believers, but we're only able to be here because of the blood of Christ. We are children of God, and he paid the price for us. And anyone who can accept that and escape the second death and live with Christ in this kingdom forever. And when we look at the kingdom, we find a new world lacking natural disasters, new bodies lacking pain and decay, our communities lacking hurt from immoral behavior, and the greatest thing, God will be with us. We will walk with him face to face, as was intended from the beginning. What a future we have to look forward to when Jesus, who once came as a newborn child, will one day return as a king. So that's what we have to look forward to in the kingdom of God. I'll see you next week.